Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, people of from all places and all kinds. Thank you for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. We appreciate it. It's a beautiful night out, so we're glad you're here. I'm Kay Matchlot, the producing director of MAX, Media Art Exploration. And this is the last in our spring series of MAXforums. And what we do in these conversations is kind of play with some of the issues the artists are dealing with in our Max Machina laboratory, which is where we incubate and make work. And I see one of our alums in the audience, Noon, yes. So we both the artists tonight, Kate and Matt, are in our current Max Machina laboratory. And we are at this intersection between live arts and science and technology. And that is because we want the artists to be involved in the most important conversations of our time. And they use the tools that can make those conversations more interesting, and then they can also comment on all those tools, all that science and technology, and how it's affecting our lives. So we get to meet a wonderful array of artists and support their work. So thank you for coming tonight. And I want to thank our partner, Onyx Studio, hosting us here. They're very good partners. We couldn't do it without Matt and John and Vallejo. So thank you. Tonight, we decided to end on a light note, if you will, but a very fantastic theater maker and thinker from the 20th century, Antonin Artaud, said humor is anarchy. And I would say, yes, it's anarchy. So it then upends ideas, it changes and it can change and create new ways of thinking. And both these artists tonight create their own kind of anarchy in their work. And it sneaks up on you and you find yourself laughing and smiling at bloodshed and mayhem, which then has all kinds of effects on the nervous system, which is fascinating. So I invite Matt Romein and Kate Leidenheim to the stage, and we are delighted to have Luc Dubois guiding this conversation. Luc is the co-director of the IDM, Integrated Design Media Department at NYU, another group we work very closely with. And he is a maker of art and music in new forms, in new ways, for sure. So I'm glad to have them all here tonight, and I invite them to the stage. And I forgot to bring out my little prop. There's a QR code by the wine, and any amount donation helps Max. We are agile and small, but we need your help. So please feel free to. It's very easy to donate with a QR code, as we know. So thanks for thinking and being here with us.
Oh boy. Let's see if I can do this. I think I did it. Do you think I did it? I did.
I hear you.
I managed. Amazing. You still have a deeper voice than me.
Yes. Still.
God damn it. Yours is working too?
Mine is working.
Amazing. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna look at some work that Matt and Kate have loaded up onto my computer and do a quick little, abbreviated artist presentation. And then we're gonna chat for a bit and then get some questions from you. So it's a pretty easy show. I would be remiss if I were not to introduce my friends here and give you a little bit of their biography. So this is Matt Romein. Matt is an artist and performer based in Brooklyn, New York. His work consists of live performance, virtual production, generative computer art, and multimedia installation, employing humor and subversion. This is how you got this gig. He makes work that playfully navigates the complexity of bodies caught in space between physical and digital worlds. His video design and performance work has been shown at the, you gave me a word that's impossible to pronounce.
Schauspielhaus.
Schauspielhaus, Hamburg. Man and Contemporary Solo Rep, the Public Theater, and more. His art installation work has been shown at Sundance New Frontier programs, IDFA's Doc Lab, and South by Southwest. He has had artist residencies and received grants from Pioneer Works, Culture Hub, Signal Culture, NYU, New Ink, and more, and he's currently a studio member here at Onyx. And Kate Leidenheim is a choreographer, media designer, and creative technologist. Her work spans interactive installation, media design, performance, and robotics. She researches bodies in motion and how they impact and are impacted by systems of social and technological pressure. Leidenheim holds an MFA in media design practices from the Art Center College of Design. She's conducted research in motion interfaces for robotics design at UCLA and was the 2019 to 2020 artist in residence at the Robotics Automation and Dance Lab at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. Her artistic projects have been presented internationally, including The Invisible Dog, National Sawdust, Grizzly, Brown University, Joe's Pub at the Public Theatre, the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and the Performance Arcade in New Zealand, all things I can pronounce. Her work has been celebrated in Dance Magazine as one of their 25 to watch and best of 2018, and she's the Associate Artist in Residence at the Maya Brin Institute for New Performance and Technology at the University of Maryland, College Park. I did it. All right, thank you guys.
Nicely done.
Thank you. Who wants to show stuff first? Flip a coin, shoot for it.
I can do it. Or do you want to do it? Okay, then I'll do it.
Okay, here we go. I'm gonna DJ and you're gonna talk.
So yeah, I guess this is the part where I talk about what kind of artist I am, and then we play videos reinforcing that.
Yes.
Cool. So,
Observe.
hey, I'm Matt. I guess just for the context, I used to be a theater maker. I studied acting in undergrad, and then I designed a video for a show where I had to figure out how to make the TV actually change channels when I gave the actor a remote on the stage, and they kept telling me to just play a video, and I was like, no, I want the actor to actually be able to, what if they want to watch a different show on that night of the performance? And that kind of, trying to answer that question led me down this interactive kind of arts kind of path. Fast forward, my first project I was going to talk about was Meat Puppet Arcade. This is a project where I did a naked 3D scan of my body along with collaborator Joe Mango, and we made a whole arcade system where you could play video games with our bodies and do kind of slightly maybe unethical things to it. I guess we can cue that video. So that's me just kind of in this Sisyphean kind of machine just getting pushed around. There is a version of this where you can push the buttons to actually control each one of the things that goes around. This was kind of like a cannon blaster where the bodies just kind of pile up and you can fire them off at whatever direction you like. This was a more meditative piece where it just keeps spinning back and forth slowly. This was a more introspective time in my career. This one was, it actually had a wireless gyroscope in it, and it was kind of like a snow globe was the concept. And as you moved it around, you could kind of tumble the bodies around, and when you shook it too hard or turned it around, they would all kind of, just fly off into space. And then I also made a version of this, which I wanted to show because it most relates to the work that I'm working on right now, and I'm going to be presenting at Max Machina in November. This is also Meat Puppet Arcade, but where you can use a bat to hit me. So. That was a really fun one. That one was fun because I love to talk about how there were 8-year-old kids that got to try it, and they had really great feedback on the project. And then this next project I made with a collaborator, Lydia Jessup. This was during 2020, during the pandemic, and we made a tourist agency that ran in VRChat. And VRChat is kind of an online social platform in virtual reality that's very kind of a sense of anarchy around it. And we would take people on tours in VRChat, running like a real company, but like a bad, like, what am I trying to say, like a strip mall tourist agency kind of vibe. We wanted to be like really playful. And we would invite everybody who was in Amsterdam for this festival. We were in New York in our apartments running this whole thing. but people would join us in headsets, and then we asked them to choose a mannequin of the stereotypical tourist that they wanted to be while they were on this tour. So here I am kind of walking you through. We have a wide variety of very popular and very in-demand tourist avatars, which we will all be wearing during the tour. We have like the sunbird over here. We have the early adopter whose love of early adoption of technology. We've all seen that on a tour, someone trying to film something with their iPad and they look a little ridiculous, but they don't care. The recent retiree, someone who no longer is shackled to their job and is exploring the world on bus tours across Europe. We also have the school field trip. We have a young child and the blossoming of their life as they get their permission slip from their parents. This is our lab. So, yeah. And then I'll wrap it up here just so I want to make sure we have time to talk. This is the project I'm working on right now that I actually developed here at Onyx initially, but at Same Festival in Amsterdam last November. It's called Bag of Worms. This is a motion capture theater performance in which it's kind of about creative violence and context collapse. And this is with me and my two collaborators, Peter Mills-Weiss and Julia Mounsey.
This room looks suspiciously familiar in the video.
All right, our first scene tonight is Coca-Cola execution. Peter, can I have you come to the center of the stage?
Okay.
Peter,
Yeah.
you will be playing the role of Coca-Cola. Peter,
Yeah.
you have been accused of crime. How do you plead?
Not guilty.
You have been found guilty.
What?
You will be executed at dawn.
Shit.
It's dawn.
Damn.
Drop to your knees. Julia, you will be playing the role of the executioner. Here's your executioner's axe. You may approach Peter. Peter,
Yeah.
do you have any last words?
I'm happy to be here.
When you're ready, Julia. Let's move on.
It's hard to do a good death scene.
I think we're going to talk about that.
I think we are. Is it my turn?
It's your
turn. How exciting. I don't think I'm as funny as Matt. So this first piece that I'll show is something that I made a whole 10 years ago. And it looks like something that I made a whole 10 years ago. But I want to show this piece because it's the reason that I make work with technology. I studied classical ballet and dance at the Boston Conservatory, and it was a very conservative place when I was there. So like computers were not something that we were encouraged to use or play with. And when I left, I got, you can play it while I'm talking.
Yeah, you got it.
I got commissioned to choreograph an electroacoustic ballet about the hacker collective Anonymous. And that's Sabu as a contemporary dancer and Kayla also as a contemporary dancer. This is also the reason that I have come to be known as somebody who is very online. I learned about 4chan by studying this dance. I learned about online performativities by working on this dance. And I also took a little bit of a deep dive into how media and choreography can work together. You can play the next one. This goes on for like a long time. Longer than we need to spend looking at it. Then a few years went by, I made a bunch of mediocre dances, as one does after they get a lot of attention at age 23, which is what happened when I made Hack Politics. So this is a piece called Class, when I figured things out a little bit better. This is a piece about internalized misogyny, and it is a film and an interactive installation where audiences are invited to get their nails painted while this video installation unfolds around them. And it all centers around the idea of a glass ceiling, and the kinds of things that people do to each other when they are inside of such a pressure cooker. And I painted a lot of people's nails during this piece. You can move to the next one. So more of an integration with media. You can see somewhat of a trajectory, I hope. This is a piece I made more recently. Actually, this is a piece I made after seeing Meat Puppet Arcade and getting kind of inspired by this fellow right here. And this is a bit of a meditation on digitized violence and the ways that it can be kind of pretty at the same time. And I also started developing this weird obsession with choreographies of falling and dying. And these were ones that were generated by the computer. And they go on for a long time also. Time-based art, that's the thing about time-based art, is it unfolds over time. So as these bodies kind of like generate in midair and then like crash and burn, they get more crumpled, they get more they kind of deform in certain ways, they pass through each other, and these are kinds of tropes of digital spaces and digital bodies, but I find them really weirdly compelling. Do you want to scrub ahead in the video a little bit? There's this, yeah.
Here-ish?
Yeah, this is perfect.
Ooh.
So they also accumulate over and over, and these kinds of like very pretty lyrical falls that they start out as get more and more disturbing as you add volume. And the music is by a fellow named Miles Avery. And we can move to the last one, the next one. So I mentioned this obsession that I developed with choreographies of falling and dying. So for a project related to this falling thing, I was researching some stop motion because there are lots of stop motion examples of people dying because people use these animations in video games primarily. And so I was doing some research and I found this video that was 145 unique motion capture deaths. And this is like a 10-minute video where you can watch motion capture deaths 145 times over and over and over again. And I thought this was the best thing I'd ever seen. And I was also like, oh, that's like just like Martha Graham, which is maybe not a usual reaction, but it's the reaction that I had, and I got really excited about this, and I started doing lots of research about how modern dance falls and video game death animations are basically the same thing. I wrote the score for Animating Death. It's a choreographic pattern that all of these performances of death and dying follow, including yours. We'll get there. And I made this interactive inflatable installation where it requires audience members to fall at the feet of the statue in order to blow it up. And
Very cool.
yeah, and
then you have the thing you're working on now.
the thing that I'm working on for the Max Live Festival upcoming in November. And this is a piece called Commit, and it is where I now perform these choreographies of falling and dying over and over again for an hour or until I get too tired. An hour is usually pretty good. And so I pick a fall and I perform it to a pop song for about 5 minutes, as long as the pop song is. And while this is happening, I'm taking in feedback from the audience about whether or not my falls are good enough. And they get to say yes or no, and if yes, what I could do better, or sorry, what I did well, and if no, what I could do better. And then I read their feedback out to them and attempt to improve my falling for the next round. I pick a new song related to what they have told me as well. And yeah, the thing that's cool about this one is that I don't make up the jokes. The audience just says what they think, and it ends up being funny. So if you want to fast forward a little bit.
You bet.
Not that we don't love Rina Sawayama, but an example. Committed. She commits to whiplash each fall. Are you tired yet? More to come. Phase first increases intensity. The more the head gets lost, the more the fall feels real. Seems like someone shoved you on the shoulder and you committed to a twisting fall. A sense of abandonment. Exhaustion makes for better falls. There's a story here about trying to stay balanced, but that isn't a lack of commitment to the actual fall. Extended left arm and head bobble at the end of fall, convincing of despair and finality. Wow, long song, impressive falling. Love how you flung yourself into the mat. Second half is more powerful. Recalibration necessary. Yeah, so that's me in 5 dances.
That's awesome, both of you guys. Okay, I'm gonna figure out how to hit the button that gets all this stuff off my screen while we talk. Thank you both. My first question, which is a softball simply because it involves me simultaneously putzing around on my computer, is so we were brought here ostensibly under the theme of humor, right? And I think one of the things we all talked about beforehand is that neither of you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you both sort of conveyed you don't necessarily self-identify as a person who is making funny work, right? And yet there is humor, there is irony, there is deep, in both of your work, there's deep connection with bodies and digital bodies and physical bodies and all the things that you're not supposed to do to a physical body that you can do with a digital body at the touch of a button, and maybe how that iterates back into the physical world. And I don't know, is humor evoked in your world? What do you think is funny? That's kind of what I'm getting at. Somebody.
Yeah, no, I got.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking, I think I rarely strike out to be like, I have to make a funny piece. I mean, I think honestly, when that's your goal, it's probably gonna fail.
Right.
To just like hit that head on, so I kind of usually approach it from the side. A lot of times, I kind of came through like a kind of DIY scene of like, you know, doing video performances on a bed sheet in a warehouse and trying to work in kind of a theater context with bringing kind of as much tech as I could fit in like a duffel bag and kind of set up. So I've always been really into the idea of using really expensive equipment to do the stupidest thing I can imagine.
Okay.
Like I like that there's this, a lot of technology, like even this motion capture system right here is really like, oh, it's super expensive, and when it's super expensive, it means like we need the economy of movement. We need to put a body in a motion capture suit that like really has all the movement because there's this expensive system, and like we need to demo its capabilities. And I'm just like, what if I use this like, you know, tens of thousands of dollars system to like just do bad sketch comedy, or like have people do kind of like bad rips on like execution scenes as like Coca-Cola and stuff. And I think through that byproduct of being a little bit cheeky, a little bit playful, and like also maybe that kind of brat in the back of the classroom throwing paper airplanes kind of vibe to some of the opportunities I get to make work, then maybe that's where humor kind of comes into it.
I can accept that answer. That's fair. Kay, what do you got?
Yeah, I can resonate with this idea around the worshiping of the technology, maybe at the expense of what it is that the technology can express. And I think with motion in particular, motion capture pushes an aesthetic on the body as well. Me moving here in space, as my dance shows, like me moving in space versus what the motion capture captures is actually a really different image. And I think there's some humor in that. There's this ironing out of fat, of mistake, of like certain curvatures of my spine, of all of these things, and showing, just like really showing the difference between what the very serious thing, or like what I take very seriously that I'm doing versus the image of the avatar itself. I think there's a humor in that, or at least some kind of subversion.
When did you guys first witness this motion capture stuff? Do you remember? Like when the first time you saw it?
As an artist in my work, or just like the
No,
first time
just
I
out
ever
there,
saw
just
it?
like Lord of the Rings special edition DVD, or
Yeah, probably.
here, or
That.
what? Like no, seriously.
Gollum.
Sure, right. So were you like, I want that, or were you like, that's appalling? I don't want anything to do, or you know what I mean? Like, I stumbled across it through like medical research. Like, I'm a 20th century user of motion capture equipment. It's depressing. So I witnessed it in this very like clinical space, and that still kind of informs like what I think you're supposed to do with it.
I use the Connect a lot. Like no work I would ever show in this context, but like my first pieces were like making dance pieces with a Connect.
Cool.
And like trying to, I remember I had to build a little media cart where everything came out as just an electrical cord I plugged in, because it was like a showcase where you had like 2 minutes of tech before
All right,
you had to
yeah.
like present. So I was like, I can't calibrate something. I just got to come in here and
Right.
do something. But like, it was a terrible motion capture device, but it was like still really fun, and like really got me excited about when are we gonna hit this point where, I mean, I think with the Connect, did you ever work with the Connect?
Not really. Oh, I've performed in front of one, but I haven't really used it as a technologist.
The in front of it is so, I was doing like dance work with it, and it's like a 2.5D performance. You have to like move
Right.
in the frame of a camera.
If your aspect ratio is too sharp, it's like, I don't see a body anymore.
So yeah, it was like this
Sick.
weird flattening of a movement. And then with like, I don't really identify as a choreographer, but I worked with a lot of dance artists, and it was just immediately apparent that like collapsing movement to like a plane of movement where you can maybe move like a meter forward or backwards was really limiting.
Yeah.
And I think ever since then, I just was ready for the next
I
evolution.
mean, you would opine on this better than me. I think you're not a choreographer.
I would agree.
Yeah, I think you're
I'll add it to the bio.
yeah, you can add it to the bio. I don't think anybody's gonna dispute that. Yeah, I mean, but both of you like, use motion capture. You're both in your own ways, also like misusing motion capture. Like the word, the technology has a framing of its use in its title, right? You're supposed to capture the motion. You're not supposed to use the motion live, but you both do. We all do. This is like rigged for that kind of thing. And that, until fairly recently, was like a pretty abnormal, that was like an off-brand use of this stuff, right? And then you have things you can do in real time with game engines and yada, 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 and now we all do this now. But you're also doing it in a context that is about like, how is it going to represent me different than what I would do live? And Kate, like the pieces you do that have that circular form in them, like taking the mocap of the fall, like that's amazing, because you're creating this like recursive machine performance around how you're supposed to look like when you're falling according to somebody else's. It's really, that's a really interesting use of that technology in a way.
Thank you.
I don't know.
That's very nice of you to say.
Yeah.
I'm going to actually pull backwards from that a
Yeah.
little bit. I'm thinking still about the Connect, and like this will loop back to what you said, I promise. I will respond to the moderator, I swear. I was really intimidated by technology for a really long time. I really felt like it would never be for me. And there are several reasons why that was. I wasn't trained in it, and dancers take training really seriously. In case you guys didn't, like, that's something that they like really latch onto, including me. Like if I spent all of this time becoming an expert in this one thing, how dare I say that I might be an expert in this other thing that I haven't spent as much time on. I've relaxed on that over time, but like I still feel that imposter syndrome, I would say. If someone when like the Connect was popular had like dropped that in front of me and been like, make something with it, I would have like ran out of the room crying, because I would have been like, there's no possible way. And I think there is a certain way in which I still feel that. Like I still feel a little bit of that impulse when I'm in a room full of technology. I'm like, this was not made for me. This was made for somebody with a different set of skills to figure out how to show me. So part of learning technology for me was a way to feel like a little bit more empowered about how my image is captured and then repurposed and recycled and recirculated.
I think that actually, I think that connects to the humor part of it. What you're pointing out, that like none of this tech that we use is really designed to be used either in like a live performance or for our types of practice. So we all have like, you and I both have translation errors in our projects, you know, because like we're taking this video game software and hardware and stuff, and it's like designed for this one purpose, but then we're trying to do something different, and I'm sure you've had to come up with all these workarounds to get it to work for you, and that actually becomes an opportunity usually that we kind of probably jump on as like, oh, there's something here.
Yeah, even just not being upright is something. I use a Rococo motion capture suit for this performance, and even just laying on the floor is like, it hates it. It like just wants me to stand on 2 feet. I don't know if you come across these things.
Sometimes it'll like, it does a weird thing where it lifts the feet all the way up into the air and like,
Yeah, and it's like, so the system makes mistakes, and even in like Matt, your interactive pieces, like it's breaking the kinematic ordering all the time. Like when you're piling yourself into the cube, right? It's like breaking your body in the wrong way. It's treating you like a rag doll, right? Not a body, not a human, right? And there is that kind of thing. Like when your avatars are falling, it's the same thing. Like the leg will pop out the wrong way, and you're doing this in extremis violence to virtual versions of yourselves that I think is really compelling. It's not, I wouldn't call it funny, because that would be wrong, but it brings out this kind of like, I don't know, this weird uncanny feeling where you're like, oh my gosh, like that's something we shouldn't be doing, or we shouldn't be allowed to do, but it's so easy. And then we do it in the real world, right? And that's like the heartbreaking fact of all of this. I don't know. I have a beef about data visualization that I've said many times, which is that it anesthetizes us, or it could potentially anesthetize us, right? When we start treating people as numbers, when we start looking at bar graphs instead of photographs, we lose sight of what those things mean, or what those things actually signify, that they're people, right? And I wonder if either of you have the same sense sometimes as we move more and more and more into this virtualized space, if we're losing something, or if your work is about interrogating that or recapturing that, or how that plays out in your process. That was a deep thought. Let you digest. Might be a bad question, I don't know. Yeah.
I think ultimately we gain more than we lose. I do think something is lost, but I think something is lost in any kind of notational practice. And I do think that motion capture is a notational practice. So you could take a motion and you could write down with as much detail as you possibly can everything that you saw. You could take a motion and you could film it. You could take a picture of it. And in each one of these mediums, something is lost from the live thing that somebody performed that you saw or didn't see. But then we get all of these different ways of seeing, and that's exciting to me. Or experiencing, not just seeing, hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your take on this?
I'm trying to think. All I could think of was like, I remember when I was doing Meat Puppet Arcade, I wanted to use my own body one, because I couldn't really imagine, well, actually my collaborator did get naked as well, and we scanned his naked body, so it was shocking that he was interested in it as well.
Sure.
So it's kind of a mix of both of our bodies in it. But there was kind of this like, how do I explore, I don't know if consent's the right word, but I was just like, I want to explore these things, and I'm only comfortable doing it with my body. And in that practice of doing that, it really kind of personalized the technology and the tech and like all these things we're doing. Like it was like, I mean, there's something really odd and watching, like, I mean, for the umpteenth time, your naked body like tumbling over and falling off a ledge and smacking against something. So there's a way in which that I guess kept me anchored to the personalness
Yeah.
of what I was playing with technology.
Right. Right. You're autobiographically invested in people abusing you when it's you. Right. Yeah. That's really interesting. When you started doing, like, your tech life is a little bit different than Kate's. You were doing like theater kind of technology.
Mm-hmm.
So were you like a code literate person going into this world, or did you?
Not really. Like I said before, I studied acting originally, and then around my junior year of undergrad, I realized I have to make a living maybe doing what I'm doing, and I didn't want to do that with acting. Like so I started designing some shows, and that just got me involved with like theater tech. And then I started having ideas that went beyond the technology of it, and I was kind of like, I guess I need to learn how to code to build some of the ideas I have. And I just kind of butted my head against the wall and like learned very slowly. This is kind of before like YouTube tutorials were everywhere. But I don't know, I've always been very video game nerd, kind of, I was the kid that would like figure out how to get the classroom computer to do weird things. I don't even know what they are, but I mean, it's like I was a very tinkerer, kind of like curious with like the home computer and like searching the internet for ways to install a game on a floppy disk that wasn't compatible with like whatever, or to get around the school security system for trying to install a computer game or something.
Right. That works for me. That's very cool. I have one last thing I want to ask you guys about, and then I want these folks to chime in. Both of you teach. Maybe not presently, but you teach, and I assume you teach stuff that has something to do with what you make, right? So when you're working with students, like do you have a personal ethos around how you frame this technology that you're working with? Do you try to impart specific ethical values or life lessons or an understanding of how this stuff is supposed to work in our world today?
I can jump in on that. I remember the first time I was collaborating with somebody who was making something for me in P5.js, which is a coding language combining processing and JavaScript. And that collaborator was unable to be at our show, and I was so terrified. And he was like, well, you can just figure it out. Here are the documents. And I just like ran out of the room crying. I didn't actually do that, but I had no idea what to do with it because I had no way to bridge the language. And now I am a professor who tells students, like, here's how you interpret the documentation, and here is how you can use it. I want to make sure that they know that it is for them, that it's not just like, someone shoving it at them, like, figure it out. You don't have any help in this. And all that to say, I want them to come to this kind of technology sooner than I did. I want them to be less afraid of it sooner than I was, and feel like they have a method of interpreting it and like a sense of excitement around what it could do for their practice, or what kind of creativity it can unlock in them.
That's cool.
I guess I don't know that I ever talked about like an ethical framework, but maybe by the way I structured my classes, I was kind of imparting a specific thing. I always like put a show on for my class.
Yeah.
They're all like live performance with technology in some way kind of classes. And I used to be a technical director and like a production manager and for a couple of like theater companies and stuff. And I would just get in it. I'd be making spreadsheets and dress rehearsals and like booking the spaces to getting like it, trying to email the people at the NYU building like, what, is it available May 8th? Because we're putting the show on.
Right,
And
right.
we're the day before, we gotta have dress rehearsals
Right,
and stuff.
right.
I would just like, I loved it. It was so much fun to put this like kind of dance mom kind of persona on of like, I'm gonna make this happen. And if you don't show up to the show, not only am I gonna fail you, I'm gonna be really disappointed in you. I guess what I'm getting at is I always wanted to teach people that you're collaborating with the technology.
Yeah.
Like, there's never a point in which like, you know, inevitably I would have students that would make pieces where it was just a pre-recorded video.
Mhm.
I'd still make them stand on stage the entire time that video played, and there's a spotlight on them.
Oh, nice.
Like, you have to, like, we need to see that you are related to what you're making,
That is a good
and like
catch.
you have to be there with it. And like, I think that really changes what you make, and like, it implies a certain amount of accountability to what you're presenting, rather than like, you know, I turned this in and my professor saw it and no one else needed to see it. Maybe some people in the classroom kind of saw it and they got some weird looks. But anyway, summer vacation, you know, whoop, we're done. So like that kind of accountability and collaboration, I guess, is the long-winded way I'm getting out of my ethics in teaching and technology.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I love what you said about this stuff is for you, like reducing the fear factor. You know, the one thing that I think has changed in the last like 20 years, right, is the documentation has become more inclusive and welcoming in the community. You know, and there's a community standards around things like P5JS, right, which is why we all teach it. But regardless, it's still very scary, right? Like, yeah, I think as educators, the more you bring of your life story to the table around that, like, weird, like, moment with technology of, like, is this for me, right? The more you're going to bring folks in.
Yeah, I think also, I teach at a public university, and I teach mostly students who are majoring in either theater or dance.
Mm-hmm.
So they really value a kind of like person-to-person sort of educational framework. They are expecting to learn, like, a body demonstrates something to them and then they replicate it through their own bodies. So this kind of like through a medium sort of teaching is actually really radically different for them. I don't know if that was, so like they're used to a show, they're used to that framework, they're used to all of those like kind of structures and standards and like listening to a stage manager and like certain kinds of hierarchies that are enforced in performance settings. But they are not used to like curiously searching for something online on their own.
Right.
And that's something that's like a value that I hold really strongly in my own practice. Like, I really want to know what I'm using to make the thing that I'm making, because otherwise, how can I fully express its systemic capacities if I don't understand the system? So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Question that I failed to ask during the tech check, how on earth, do we have a fourth microphone kicking around? That we could get some? Amazing. Thanks. I'd love to hear if we have any questions from folks in the audience for these guys. Ta-da! I think it's on. Anybody? Don't be shy.
Yes.
Tony. We have a
Hi.
fourth.
Just want to come back to this idea of this kind of mirror world in which you can do things that you can't do in this world. That transgressive boundary that you're crossing, and Matt, you were doing it you're both doing it, but Matt, you were doing it in a couple of ways, even with the idea of having a completely naked man, which is, you know, not something you see every day in the public sphere, I ought to add. So, and I'm interested in what that impulse is that we have to do horrible things, to do things that are absolutely not allowed, that are in the real world like terrifying or just like ugly or forbidden in some sense, and then we're exploring it, and you could say it was like exploring the horror or whatever, but I don't know, it seems to me it has something to do with like trying to find out what our own edges are, our boundaries or something, what's possible, what's not. Anyway, I'm just tossing that.
No, that's I think that's a lot of what I'm trying to explore, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head that like the idea that it's all horrific isn't quite true to my own experience. Like a lot of it's fun, like, and I actually think that what is the threshold, what I've really discovered is that there is no single threshold. One of the reasons I like doing this stuff in a room with people is what one person might find horrifying, the other person might find hilarious. And to have that kind of, if it was in a VR headset and you experienced it alone, that kind of, your experience of it, kind of like the thing I was saying with teaching, where kind of throwing people up on stage in front of each other, you're gauging the person next to you and how they're reacting to it, and that's why it's always like the nervous chuckle kind of feeling in a room of like, am I allowed to laugh at this? And I love, that's like my favorite emotion or moment, is the sense of people kind of wanting to laugh and knowing maybe they shouldn't, like, and it only lasts a little bit until it either opens or gets tamped down a little bit. And a lot of my work is kind of connected. I really did grow up playing video games, and in video games, you really do have this agency to explore things both within the rules and outside of the rules. So something like Grand Theft Auto, you can run around, you can shoot people, and that's kind of built into the game, and like people play with that. But more interesting to me is games like The Sims, where you're supposed to raise a family and build a house and lead them through, and then after you play the game for about 20 hours, you realize, like, I wonder what happened if I put them in the swimming pool and sold the ladder so they can't get out of the swimming pool, and I hit the fast forward button and just did that for 4 days, like, which I did, and which I found out later on the internet many people did. Like, there's this like playful curiosity of like, kind of, burning ants with a magnifying glass that I discovered a lot of people have that same impulse. So I am just kind of commenting on it in a way of like, I'm not quite sure what to call this or what to do with it. I just know that I find it both horrifying and fun at the same time.
Yeah, I think there's this question of consequence. You're in this place and there's no physical consequence, but maybe there is a consequence, and kind of like locking into what that consequence might be or could be or is part of the artistic exploration, at least that I'm interested in, and it seems like you are too. Yeah, I think there's I actually wonder if the consequence is positive in a certain way. Like if you get to do this in a space where there is not impact on your body, does it get it out of your system? I don't know.
I think there's a lot more consequence now, or like maybe like I don't know, politically is the right word. I personally feel like there's a lot more consequence to these technologies, these video games, these movies and stuff. Like, it's so funny, I almost feel like I'm was it Nancy Reagan, or who was it, one of the Bush people? What was the parental advisory thing that came out?
Are you talking about Tipper Gore?
Sure. Was it Tipper Gore? A Democrat?
I would not characterize Tipper Gore as a Democrat. But the PMRC, talking about the Parents Music Resource Council.
Yeah, and like the parental advisory labels and stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess to say is like I already came of a generation where there was the kind of dog whistle of like video games cause violence, and I was like, no, they don't. And now I'm like, but maybe.
So they don't cause violence. I read a study recently. I spent a lot of time researching choreographies of falling and dying and what their real world effects are. So something that I read along the way had to do with this question of violence in video games. And they studied a group of children who played a lot of video games and a group of children who didn't, and their propensities towards violence as they age were like not even sort of different. And even the ones who played a lot of video games were less violent in their lives than the other group. I'm going to need to find that and cite it properly, but I do remember reading it. That said, they use video games to train the military. So it's not like they don't have the United States military in particular does not have this kind of technology in mind as a means of making war easier for people to deal with. So it can be used as a training mechanism, and it can also be used for fun. And like, what's the middly part?
Well, I find myself, I'm not actually of the opinion that video games cause violence. I'm finding myself questioning, like, as things become more photorealistic, to be indiscernible from, and like, just things collapsing on social media, like, I'm seeing this clip, is it real? Like, am I traumatized? Or is it like just a clip from a video game? Like, the distance, one of the things I always cite is if you look at like Mortal Kombat in 1992,
Right.
that like caused, they actually went in front of Congress to talk about
Sure.
violence in video games with like little pixels of blood flying out.
Right.
Now, if I actually have I have it queued up if we want to watch it. Do we want to watch it?
Wait, what do we have queued?
One of the links I sent you is what Mortal Kombat looks like today. And it is wild, if I may diverge.
Oh no, we're gonna. Oh wow, you sent me a Word document.
I'm progressive and like that. You know?
Fascinating. Oh yeah, you
See, it's all linked.
Yeah.
So
hold on, we're gonna look at this. Keep talking. I'm gonna find the
so
button.
anyway, just to say, like, Mortal Kombat, it was a game. It came out like the Super Nintendo and Genesis, and people got really like, whoa, there's so much violence and all that. This is what it looked like.
Oh yeah.
And it's kind of, you know, I can imagine it was intense back then. It's just kind of funny now. Now that same sequence in Mortal Kombat 11. This is very graphic, by the way. I'm sorry. I think it's also just choreographically genius.
Could not have done better.
But that's what I find. I mean, I know, like, I'm having this kind of moment of like, what do I do with that? Like, that's so different than when I grew up playing video games.
Yeah.
And what's the end point of where are we going with, like, what's Mortal Kombat 18 look like? Or
They just kill you. Actually, Mortal Kombat 18, you somebody comes out and kills and actually does that to you. That's my prediction. That's my dystopian prediction. You know, but yeah, amazing. I've never seen that though. All right, next question. He's got another question.
Hey, both. Thank you so much for this. I've been really intrigued by this idea of like research and performance and like getting one aspect of your like training into both parts. So like, could you talk about like how you change between coding for or getting ready for, you know, just your curiosity or thinking about technology in a curious way, and then how do you think about it for performance? And if that changes, or if there's a through line, or how do you get there?
I learn a lot through learning new technology. Like, a lot of times I'll be like, I'm gonna learn this new language or this new thing, and as I'm learning it, and it's really boring tutorials, that's where my brain starts to drift a little. I'm like, I wonder if I could do this stupid thing, and like, that usually leads to kind of a, you know, the curiosity kind of coming in, and like, where can I take it? And then I will say I feel like most projects I've ever had, the bulk of the coding of it, I've done it in 4 days. And I don't mean that as like a humble brag. I mean it as like suddenly it becomes clear what I'm trying to do and I can just get there. And then it's not like, it's actually not as complex as it may look or something. In practical terms, or really, this took me a while to get to, was when I'm having rehearsals with people that are, like if I'm having rehearsals with other people in the room or working with other people, I have a rule where there's no coding allowed. Like I'm gonna do some stuff in my studio, I'm gonna bring it to a rehearsal, we're gonna use it. If it breaks, we're just gonna figure out something else to do or play around it or use the fact that it broke. But I had too many rehearsals where some poor person I'd be working with would be standing in a motion capture suit or in front of a camera, and I'd be like, just sit there, just hang on for a minute, I'm just gonna fix this really quick. Yeah. And then 45 minutes later, like they walked out of the room and they don't want to collaborate with me anymore. So that's just a practical like thing I've reached on for. I don't know if that you found a similar thing or.
Yes, and the person who wants, it's me.
I walked out of the room. Right.
No, so I've like fairly recently started programming. I would say that this is like in the last 3-4 years endeavor of me doing it really seriously. That's unfair. I coded websites for money for a while, but I mean more like mixed media sorts of work. I get interested in code or like trying to program something if I am conceptually interested in what the system is trying to reveal to me. So I'm interested in coding motion capture because I am fascinated by like what it does to movement, what qualitatively it does to movement, that kind of like specialized aesthetic of like digitized motion. I think it's fascinating. So I want to understand what it means to create it. Like what it means to be a body, not just getting that thing captured, but also to be the body who is writing the thing that enables that capture. Does that make sense?
Got time for another one.
I guess I want to kind of go back to some tension that Tony was talking about, and maybe like the grotesqueness and the vicariousness, which makes the grotesqueness kind of okay, and then the savvy playing with the glitch and the limitations of the technology. I feel for myself where the humor comes, but then where it's really poignant and it kind of lands in my stomach is when you put the human back in the loop, and you're both doing that in different ways. And I'm curious if that's explicit, or if it just kind of happened to be that you were like, oh, the human goes back in the loop, the body gets back in there. Because I find that's where the poignancy comes from. I get the humor part, I get the tension that makes me kind of nervously be like, oh wow, that's kind of crazy. But it's the human in the loop that gets me back into like, oh crap, and you're both doing it in different ways, even in your teaching you were saying. So I'm just curious.
I can jump on this one. At risk of being like, I'll just say the thing that I want to say. The human is always in the loop, whether or not we see it or not. So I like that's really important for me in my practice. A writer named Legacy Russell, who wrote a book called Glitch Feminism, which is an excellent book, highly recommend, talks about the online to AFK loop, and AFK stands for away from computer. I'm sorry if I'm explaining something that you already know about, but for the folks who might not know about this. And her argument is that things that you do online have a direct effect over things that happen out in the real world, and then that feeds back into the online world, and you have this kind of ongoing reinforcing training loop. And I think that happens with bodies in motion too. So a human body performed something, a computer interprets it in some way. That motion becomes a trope that feeds back out into the real world, and there's this ongoing recursive training loop that happens no matter what. So this feeds a lot into the things we talked about with regards to consequence, with regards to violence, with regards to how we expect to see bodies in space and bodies in digital space, and how we expect to treat them. So yes, I'm super interested in that, and I think I'm interested in revealing the actual body that's implicated in this system, no matter what.
And
always.
You corrected me. I actually meant with the carcass on the line, the body's on the line, not just the human as an agent, but like the actual unit.
Any more questions?
Thank you, both of you, for sharing your thoughts with us. I'm curious about this idea of body and XR word and ethics, and I found it somehow, because there are so many discussion around use of body in VR and like empathy machine and like so many other things, which so many agree or disagree, but I found it like in this discussion, like you're pushing some of this violence or disturb image of body in a way, mix it with this humoristic gesture somehow to are you basically wants to emphasize it? Are you basically wants to soften it? I just want to know what you think of the idea of ethic in use of body in XR word, and how this humor or comedy can help us to somehow, like, not directly target this conversation of ethic that kind of limit our practice. Thank you.
I went first last time.
Matt, you go for it.
I'm thinking about, in so much as the work I'm making is like humorous, I don't know if this is connected at all. Like, I like to make things that are also like entertaining, which I feel is like, I don't know, that's like a dirty word, like in art or something. Like, but I
You
want
get voted off the island.
I want to make commercially acceptable work that can make me money.
How dare
you? No, I guess there's like a theater kind of thing there that I'm just like, I want people to come away from watching something I worked on like with a sense of shock or awe, or like that was fun and like all that, and so that maybe that's just kind of a Trojan horse to some of the ethical things I'm considering in my work and I'm curious about. But I also like to make things that are fun for me. Like, the worst thing as a performer you can do is not be having fun on stage, because I guarantee if you're not having fun, no one's having fun watching you. So there's that kind of sense of what I'm trying to keep myself entertained and invested in what's happening, whether it's an installation work or whether it's a live performance. So in that sense, I guess like exploring my body or exploring what can be done with bodies is like just a topic of endless fascination for me. So that's kind of my impetus for continuing to work on that.
Kate, what do you think? Do you live for the applause?
It's okay.
Sort of, sometimes. Most of the time. I'm like interested in parallels in other mediums. I think like there's lots of concern about how violence and distortion and like embodied presence manifests in XR, because the technology is still fairly new and nascent in many ways. But I don't know that I hear so much of this discussion going on with like horror movies or like theater or in like tragedies and things like that. Like things that have been happening for hundreds of years or even millennia that explore the depths of like human depravity. And so I think this is another medium through which that can be explored. And that's not to say that artists have no responsibility in what goes out into the world. Like I don't want to make that statement. Artists have a lot of responsibility for what goes out into the world. But yeah, I think this is, if not in art, then where? Like where do we get to experiment? So
Yeah. One more question.
Hi. I'm glad you said that because in maybe the spirit of keeping the artist accountable, what is the worst thing you've ever done to a sim? And or an avatar or any kind of body representation or extension?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Does anything come to mind for you?
well, okay, so the worst thing I ever did to a sim was repeatedly light it on fire. That was great. 13-year-old Kate got a lot of joy out of that.
I already gave you the worst thing I did, so I'll share one I found out. I researched this and I found out that other people had the same impulse. And one person was talking about how they you could make your Sims that were married, or I guess just in dating, cheat on their partnered Sim with another Sim, and
Psychological torture.
one person put one of their Sims in the bedroom closet, then sold the door and patched it up. So they're in like a 1 meter by 1 meter room with no window or door. And then they bought the partner of that Sim into the bedroom and had that Sim cheat on them. And the Sim in the closet could hear them and is crying. And then they lit the house on fire. So this is what I'm talking about.
Wow, that's like real goals. It's hard to beat that. All right. Thank you both. That was great.
And I just
Thank
want
you.
to take this stage once more to say you can come see their work in our festival in November, 9th to the 11th. Both of their work, it's wonderful. So you can see it in full capacity. And thank you for coming tonight. And thank you guys so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.